To another edition of Lee's Open Mic. Today, our very special guest, Mr. Tom Rhodes, who took the time to talk to us. Good to see you, buddy.
Great to see you, brother. Thanks for going and knocking yourself out on
the decor
set. Yeah.
How about that, man? There's some
because we have a green screen, and you could put any beautiful thing behind us, and
we'd like to think there's a digital mason that is feeding his family tonight. You know, with all the bricks that he laid. You've got the most interesting pathway to where we are today. Because as a comic from Florida, you told me originally.
I grew up in a little town outside of Orlando called Oviedo.
Right. Started doing stand-up at what age? What are we talking about?
17. Had a fake ID.
Yeah.
Went to the clubs. Yeah.
Yeah. When did you get bit by the bug? Was it first time on stage, or what happened?
My father loved stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
And my father loved Richard Pryor. So my dad had most of Richard Pryor's vinyl records, and I used to listen to those as a kid. I didn't understand the dirty, adult, risque stuff, right. But the way he would animate animals used to kill me. Right. And my dad actually would drive around with cassette tapes of Pryor. And I remember being a little kid driving around with my dad listening to Pryor. So my family's originally from Washington, D.C. We moved to Orlando when I was 12. When I was 11, in 1978, my uncle did open mic nights in Washington, D.C. for 1 year. And my father took me to see him perform at this open mic night at this club called El Brookman's. And the entrance was next to the stage. And we walked in, and the show was already in progress. And I was wearing a Washington Redskins jacket. And the comedian on stage pulled me on stage, and he interviewed me like I was the coach of the Redskins. And I was 11 years old, and I just gave bashful, dopey, one-word little kid answers. Yes, no.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget that moment, standing on that stage and seeing all those happy people with their heads thrown back in laughter and all the teeth in their mouth. Yeah. And that moment changed my life. And then from that moment on, I became a student of stand-up comedy. Fortunately, like Saturday Night Live was I think beginning, I think 78, 77, whenever it began. I would stay up late, watch SNL, worshipped John Belushi. Yeah. Johnny Carson, still to this day, is like a god to me. I used to, I would get the TV guide, and I would circle when there would be comedians on Carson or any of the other talk shows, and I would be in front of the TV. I would watch Carson's monologue every night, and just studied comedy.
Johnny, there is a moment that you probably have seen it that I as a comic, I watch this and I go, this is Tom Brady at the peak of his game, where he's talking about, he's doing a joke about the AWACS airplane and the radar thing, and the joke is melting. It's not working, which with Johnny it never mattered anyway, because he was so masterful at the thing falling apart. And the sound man tells Johnny what AWAC stands for, and Johnny's like, how dare you, say whatever. Why are you interrupting the monologue kind of thing? And then Johnny does the joke. He comes back, and he goes, what AWACS? And he goes, well, the sound guy goes, well, I used to fly them. That's a complete out of, bounds sort of answer that you would get from an improv. And Johnny, well, not missing a beat, said, for us? It was just so quick, and so it was just beautifully orchestrated and done. He was the best ever.
Well, do you remember when Chevy Chase started a rival? I think it was like when Fox first came on the network.
Oh, yeah.
And Chevy Chase had a failed late-night talk show, and Johnny Carson said he couldn't improvise a fart at a bean-eating contest. But Carson was so great at improvising and on the spot, and he was almost funnier with bad material.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's when you really got to see a skill set, I think.
He was brilliant. But
you did that. You did that. You're over there doing it for the Dutch.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I had a late night talk show on Dutch television.
What was that experience like?
And it was funny because people sometimes in interviews they would say to me, because it was the standard format of, they wanted to do an American late night talk show. So I would come out in the $2,000 suit from behind the big curtain, stand on the X, give my monologue, and then I would banter with my musical guest. And I had several Dutch interviewers ask me, so how does it feel that you're essentially copying David Letterman? And I said, what you don't know is I'm copying Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
Johnny Carson was my hero.
Right.
I mean, I loved Letterman,
Me too, yeah.
but they thought, oh,
right.
they were being cheeky. But Letterman was copying Johnny Carson.
Is there a universality to that, getting laughs over there? I mean, there's a bit. They speak English proficiently.
The Dutch are brilliant people. You know, they're progressive in every way. The laws, education, and they're a tiny country with a very difficult language.
So the only hurdle maybe is a reference?
They're historically great business people. Yeah. So they know no one was going to learn their...
What a deal with Manhattan. Think about it.
They traded what is now Manhattan for Suriname. Still the worst trade of all time.
That's a great deal for the Dutch.
Which Suriname is one of the small countries above Brazil, and my wife is from Suriname.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
which she's Dutch, but Suriname was a Dutch colony, and 300 years ago that seemed like a great trade.
Yeah, that's a heck of a callback. To marry a girl just for this moment.
Exactly.
So you could do that joke, Tom.
Exactly.
That's excellent work, my friend. Tom Rhodes.
The Dutch are brilliant people, and they all speak 3 or 4 languages.
Yeah. So, but as far as just a local reference was enough to find some sort of affinity where you could get the laugh. You didn't, because like I just see that show with Everybody Loves Raymond's producer, Exporting Raymond or whatever it was, when they tried to sell the show in Russia.
Right.
It didn't, I mean, the language is one thing, but they couldn't understand why an alpha male would, be belittled by his wife. It didn't play as a comedy.
The Russians probably thought the same thing I did whenever I watched Everybody Loves Raymond, because his mom and dad would always barge in.
Right.
They probably thought what I thought was, why doesn't he just lock the door?
Or move. Yeah, there was a very obvious, yeah.
And they won't be barging in every 5 minutes. You lock the door and the show's over.
Yeah, so now you're traveling the world here, or at least in the U.S.?
Well, I did not live anywhere for 10 years. I had everything in storage, and I just traveled the world as a comedian. My wife has traveled with me for the last 8 years, and 1 year ago, we got a place in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to get everything out of storage, see what I've been holding on to for all these years. But so actually, I'm traveling less. I'm traveling half the time, and I'm going to film my next hour special sometime within the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And I have a comedy travel show idea that I finally found a producer for, and we're going to pitch it to networks soon, where I'm essentially the Anthony Bourdain of comedy.
I like that. So just around the world looking for venues where comedy's being performed, and you see what the locals are doing? How does that work?
Checking out local comedy scenes, but also like, what humor's like in other countries. Yeah. What are people making jokes about in other countries? And comedy is the mark of civilization. Because if your country doesn't have comedy, you don't have free speech. Comedy, I've played in China a lot in the last 20 years. Stand-up has taken off locally among Chinese people in the last 5 years. But when you perform in China, there's the 3 T's you are never allowed to mention on stage: Taiwan, Tibet, and Tiananmen. I was just in Thailand, and you are forbidden from talking about the royal family or the king there. So, I mean, some countries have, limitations on things you can talk about.
Well,
I mean, there's just a lot of interesting facets to comedy.
Yeah, no, I'd love to see that show, man. Again, Tom Rhodes, thanks for the conversation. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, Lee.
Good to see you. Check him out if you get a chance. It's great. Great comedy. All right, guys. That'll do it from here. We'll see you.